Ooh, I dug deeper into Mike's question and OC Go Stream. It's hard to say.
Don't worry, Bill. I'll be right here.
OC Go Stream live stream switcher. That's not going to confuse an announcer at all. OC Go Stream live stream switcher. Oh, man. Oh, the Descript news. That's interesting. Wonder what they've got breaking today. Now with even more AI.
Got to redo that frame. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion. Today is graphics, so we will be talking a little bit more about graphics. If you have questions, the best day to ask about graphics are on Tuesdays. These are our graphics day. So ask those in the first hour. And in the second hour, if you've got comments or questions about SIGGRAPH, we're going to talk about not how we covered SIGGRAPH, but what we saw there. You know, the trends, the apps, all the things that we thought were cool at SIGGRAPH. So if you've got comments or questions, go ahead and throw those into Makana. Let's go ahead and jump into the first question. Bill, what do we have?
The first one, our top-rated question today, is from Mike Edwards in Brooklyn. He says, morning, everyone. Does a 1440p display, is it that much better than a 1080p display? He's looking to get some new monitors under a Mickey, and what is the most efficient purchase? And for those of you who didn't know, the office hours lists of price points, a Colin is $7 and Alex is $700. A Mickey is $3,700. So he's looking for under $3,700.
It's 32. I think Mickey's $3,200. Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
No, he corrected me because I said exactly the same thing, Alex. And
he said 37.
The price went up on the mic because it was adjusted.
I see. It was pegged to the mic. It wasn't pegged to the dollar. It was pegged to the mic. I see. I thought the dollar. See, mine now is $50 a month or $10 a month. So mine was pegged to Photoshop. So now an Alex is no longer $700. I thought we just picked a number and then stuck with it. This is very complicated for me.
And lest we forget, a Charles is 11,000 because Charles
it's properly said a Charles. so anyways, that's a really nice monitor. So I don't think I wouldn't get a 1440. I think you're either going to get a 4K or a 1080p. I'll be honest, I prefer more 1080p's than less 4Ks. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 monitors, and they're all 1080p. So I think that I would stick with more monitors that are 1080. I get Dells. I find that price to performance, I don't know if they're the least expensive monitors that you can get, but the price to performance is really good. The one thing I will say is that there are 3 things that I have to have in a monitor to buy it. Number one is I got to have a Visa mount. I got to have a Visa mount. Like, you got to be able to, I don't have it. None of these, one monitor has a stand. The rest of them are all hooked to arms, and I can move them around and get them out of the way and stuff like that. Number 2, it's got to have a C13 IEC cable. So the C13 is what you see in every computer. It's got the little hump on it. It's got the 3 prongs, and you stick it in, not the 3 round ones, but the kind of the square one with 3 prongs in it. It's got to have that because that means the power supply is built in, and that means that I don't have to figure out where that power supply went somewhere else. It makes the monitor a little thicker. It's worth it. And then the final thing is that I make sure it's got HDMI. So you can end up with some that are DVI, or not DVI, but DisplayPort. And it's fine to have a DisplayPort, but you got to have an HDMI. So those are the 3 things that I require. 1080p is important. And again, I found that we've bought at this point probably hundreds of Dell monitors. So I think that's kind of, we've kind of standardized on this one specific one. I can't think of the model number, but it has those 3 things. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, if you're going for 1080, generally it's going to end up being a 24-inch monitor. And as to the brands out there, I'll offer an alternative. HP, the Dream displays are quite nice for color matching.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Mitchell Hill, who was just speaking. Yet another mute system for your microphone and camera. What do you think of this? And he has a list for something called onairwarning.com.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, here we go. I sort of self-professed mute specialist here. But if you look at the device, it's 2 parts. One is the little display, which is a nice little tally, which is tied into Teams or Zoom, and it will show not only the mic condition, but also the camera. Sort of like when you go into Zoom, you can turn your camera on and your mic off, and it's tied to that globally. So you don't have to have that particular application in the forefront. It'll do it wherever Zoom happens to be. And then the other part is they're coming up with a switch system that allows you to mute. It's a little, it looks like an X key that you can turn it on and off. I'm not a big fan of the graphics that they have on the tally. And I'm definitely concerned when I look at their videos, they're kind of poorly done with some spelling mistakes in it. So that kind of sends a flag up for me.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, he described most of it. The switch looks like, oops, and it auto changes off of the picture. That's the little control button. It also has an app that runs on your phone, apparently, to control it. And the question is how well it works. And I guess it plugs into a USB port, but I'm not sure if it's signaling over the USB or if it's just using it for power. I guess it's signaling over the
Signaling.
USB too.
Yeah.
And but to control the mute and the camera on off the mute and on the air lights, you have to use the buttons or with the app that goes on your phone. So that sounds a little inconvenient. Whether or not it actually works with all those different, Zoom and Discord and all the other streaming software is a question. And how often will it tell you you're muted when you're not? I'm not sure. We'll have to get it and find out. And did you see a price on it, Mitch? I didn't see a price.
I did not. It's a Kickstarter item, particularly on the switches. But
it looked like for the switches, it looks a lot like this. The switches. This is $9.
Exactly like that.
In case you're wondering.
It's probably the same piece of hardware, just repurposed. Yeah.
Let's buy it for $9 and then we'll paint some stuff on it. So that's what that looks like. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't have any confidence in anything that's software based for mute. I just have to say that I feel like it needs to be. I watch a lot of people in a lot of meetings not quite get that right and have constant mute issues. And so I'm a big fan of the hard part. So what I will say is the hard part, I'm trying to find a less expensive mute switch. Which one do you have, Bill? Because yours seems to
It's the Rolls MS-111. It sounds like I'm doing a commercial for it. Anyway, I have two of these, and I'll be completely frank. The first one that I ever bought from this company, and this company is up in Utah or Colorado, I can't remember which, small outfit. They're really nice guys. They've been around for a long time. They have a lot of products. So I kind of feel good about Rolls, and I still do. I had a few little clicking transient problems, so I wrote a nice letter to them. I sent it back. It was gone for a while. It came back and it worked flawlessly. And I always love that kind of response from a small vendor of equipment. So I feel really good about them. I have two. I may get one or two more of these because I think I'm going to put one in the voice booth. We've got a thing that's going on in there. So I've been
trying to find ones that are there. I got a different one. I think Whirlwind makes one, and the problem is that when you unmute it, you can hear it. You can hear it in the line. And I was like, okay, well, that's not useful. So yours seems to work well, Bill. So I might get one. I'm trying to get a cheap one for my, not cheap, but inexpensive for my travel kit. And that's what I'm. That's
the one thing I'll note, Alex, it is kind of heavy, and that I think is a really good thing. You put it on your desk and it stays there. It's not a little oops, I knocked it off the table kind of thing.
Yeah, but I would highly recommend sticking with some kind of. If you're doing this all the time, and especially if you're doing some kind of show, get a hardware mute. The software mutes, I watch a lot of people have it not work well. Next question.
Next question comes from Craig Kadoki in Toronto, Canada. Yesterday was the 20th anniversary of the massive blackout on the East Coast of North America. How did that change your work habits then, and did you stick with them and adapt since?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yes, I moved to the West Coast, so we won't have those kind of problems.
No, we just have them rolling all the time. So
we do have rolling blackouts. The East Coast blackout didn't. I think a more pertinent question is what about the Texas blackout, which lasted 5 days or something? That was really murderous and in the middle of winter. And because they weren't on they don't share the grid with the rest of the country. They couldn't get it back online very quickly. So I would worry more about that. And I tell you, that little episode down in Texas sold hundreds of thousands of portable generators that burn natural gas or propane that people have installed in their houses for just such a situation with rolling blackouts and those kind of power interruptions that are beyond your control. So I've seen a whole lot of those. I think you bought one for your parents, didn't you, Alex? One of those standby generators or something like that.
My parents have one. I didn't buy it for them. It's a big oil one, so it's this huge oil drum that sits outside the house, and it was funny. They bought it, and then it was like 4 or 5 years before they lost power. It was like it jinxed it, so they didn't have it. And the power went out in the house. I happened to be there the first time it went out after 4 or 5 years, and I told I told my mom on the phone, oh, the power just went out. And then she got so excited. She goes, did it switch on? Did it switch on? So that's like, yes, it took a second or two, but it came back on. So, yeah. So they live in the middle of nowhere. So having power would be a good thing. Mitchell?
Yeah, the other thing to keep on the lookout for are sags. That's when the power sags when they're maybe doing a switch. I have one here at 9 o'clock every day. It's like they must be switching somewhere down the line.
You actually get a voltage change in a US grid.
It sags.
Oh, interesting.
That's what
really
ABC says. They call it a sag.
Super bad for your equipment. so that's why you definitely, if you're seeing something sag, you want to figure out how to normalize that because that power supplies really don't like that. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and maybe your wiring. I have a problem in my house because it was built 100 years ago, and it has the original wiring, and fuses. So I find that I now have a UPS that monitors the voltage. And I was horrified to discover that when the air conditioner's on and the TV's on and the microwave's on all at the same time, the voltage drops to like 104 volts, which is not good for the equipment. And it's just because the wiring can't handle it in my particular abode. So, if you have an older house or a house that was wired with aluminum wiring from the 50s or 60s, that can be a problem because it can be current limited. So that can be very bad for your equipment as well. That's why it's good to have a good power regulator or UPS that can fix that stuff on your delicate equipment.
Yeah, and you can get a UPS. You can also get you can rectify it. So you can get a rectifier, a regulator that will basically plug into the wall, and then you plug your equipment into it, and it'll maintain that voltage no matter what. So that's all. Not no matter what.
A good Furman will do that for you too.
Yeah. Next question.
Paul Wallace from Austin, Texas. What is the H100 chip? This NVIDIA chip costs $40,000 US, and some countries, not the US, are cornering the world supply. Why is it so essential for AI, and what will be the impact of its shortage?
Go ahead, John.
Okay, so the H100 is the latest GPU. It's a card. It's not just a chip. So NVIDIA they use the letter designation. So the T stands for Tesla. The A100, which is the predecessor to the H, is Ampere, and H is Hopper. So H100 is the top of the line card right now. It's selling for in between 30 to 40,000, depending on demand. Demand's super high. For example, Facebook in their centers has over 20,000 of the H100 cards installed. Stability has tens of thousands as well. And so there's this big race in all these supercomputer centers for generative AI. They're specifically designed for AI, for transformer models, because they have like 18,000 CUDA cores in each one of these chips. So they're significantly designed to do very fast neural networking. That's what they're designed to do. It's a great card. I wish I could have had one myself.
That's a lot of, I think that even if you had the cash, it's partially just getting the actual device would be a thing. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Dave Kaufman in Vancouver. What are your guidelines about when and when not to use original sound in Zoom?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, in my case, where you've got garbage trucks out or construction going on outside the door, and you've got a air conditioner that's on, it's going to sound something like this with, if you turn off original sound. You turn on original sound for musicians. So it doesn't, the noise cancellation is pretty good. So if you've got a large number of fan noise or air conditioner noise, that's the time to turn off original sound. And the other thing I wanted to mention on the mute switch thing that we got off that, where I had a chance to mention it. You can hear the backup alarms. Anyway, was that with Zoom, if you use a mechanical mute switch and you have original sound off, the mechanical mute switch prevents any sound from going to the Zoom app while you're not speaking, which is the sound that it uses to characterize for its noise reduction. So it doesn't know what to do with noise reduction until you unmute your mechanical mic switch, and it hears everything at once. So if you're going to use Zoom with original sound off, where it's doing noise reduction, it's better not to use a mechanical mic switch so that you mute it in Zoom. It just mutes the feed that's going out to Zoom, but it lets Zoom's software actually hear what's coming into your microphone, so it can characterize that sound for noise reduction.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Mike Edwards in Brooklyn. Morning, everyone. What are the panel's thoughts on this ATEM Mini alternative? And he's got a link there.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I looked at it. It has some interesting, this is what it looks like. Kind of looks familiar, doesn't it? It has less buttons than the ATEM Extreme does on it. And it has a preview row and a program row, which are separate. So you don't have to change modes like you do on the ATEM Mini. It's priced at around $295. It has a couple of other differences. It has an SD card slot on it, and it can record onto the SD card, and it can play back. It's got media control buttons up here where you can record and or play back off the SD card. So that's handy. It also has 2 still stores, which is similar to the ATEM, and it has a multi-view out. The biggest problem I see if you go to the website is it's sold out at $295. So, and that's the manufacturer. So if the manufacturer says they're sold out, that may be a problem.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, it has a T-bar on it. I think that's wonderful.
That's it. Yeah, I think it's sold out because it's not available yet. I don't think it's even shipping yet. So it's calling, I think sold out and not available yet, I think are together in this one. It's just been released. I did watch the video because the video was posted before the show. I was able to watch it. And so thank you very much. Especially if you have links and especially if you have videos, it's great for producers to ask that question before we start so that we can actually get through it. This looks it looks interesting. There's a couple things about it. Number one is the reviewer really likes the idea that you would have all the controls inside the switcher, so it just takes up one quadrant or a half that you can sit there and change the settings. I used to have a switcher like that. The HS50 from Panasonic was like that, and it drove me a little crazy. So I'm not, I don't think that that's necessarily a feature. And so that'd be one thing. I think the playback is the thing that I hope that BlackMagic looks at very closely. The 2 rows is nice. You could totally put 2 rows in for the ATEM switcher if you got rid of all the buttons that we don't use. So, like there's so many, you could take rows and rows of buttons out of here and I wouldn't notice. I wouldn't even know that they were there. I don't even know what these buttons do. Like I have a bunch of buttons down there and some of them are red and some of them are white. And they don't seem to make any difference to me. So anyway, I don't really know what they're for. And so that you could definitely put a second row in. I think that there was a lot of features in there that I think this gets into, we were talking about this yesterday, a waterfall approach versus an agile approach. And I think that there was a waterfall approach to developing the ATEM, which is that they thought about all the things they thought you'd need. They switched it all in and then none of us use it. So anyway, I think that I do like the simplified interface. I don't think it's really competitive. I mean, I think that the problem is the market size. There's hundreds of thousands of ATEMs out there. And so, developing anything for it, and also the ATEM Mini is the beginning of moving up. So as you get better or bigger or whatever you're doing, you have an ATEM Mini, and then you might get an Extreme, then you might have a 2ME or a 4ME, then a Constellation. And the issue is that the interface stays the same and the controls stay the same. And that's a huge value if you're thinking about ever growing at all. So I think that it would be, I don't see this as really that competitive, especially at $299. If it was at like $165, maybe there's people that are, cost sensitive enough to do it. But even then, time and stability are valuable. Go ahead, Mitchell.
And it doesn't have a sting button.
Sting button. Yeah, I know that's very important. Next question.
Next one comes from Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida. With all the great mirrorless camera options at lower cost, what's the appeal of the Hollyland VenusLiv? And they left the last E off of that at $1,000 US.
It's a pretty interesting camera. So this is I only got a chance to look at it, while we were talking about the last question. I can't tell what they don't seem to be showing us what the, what I can't find is like the actual specs for it. So how big is the CMOS? Here we go. But they just say it's a Sony CMOS, but they don't tell us how big the thing is. So I'm guessing it's very small. And so that's the problem. It has an HDMI interface. It also has a Ethernet. It'd be interesting to test. It is It's basically like a big webcam. That's what I mean, and that's really how they're selling it is a streaming cam. So the Ethernet can stream. It can record. It's got HDMI out. It's got its own. It has its own screen so that you can see what's going on. It's got some kind of color calibration according to them. But it doesn't. It's really hard to tell. They're not giving us enough. I think the problem really is they're not giving us enough information to know whether it's worth it or not. It doesn't look like it looks like the lens is built in, so it's just an all-in-one. Basically, this is and it has built-in UVC, so it really is just a and the RTMP streaming is built into it. It's an interesting product. I think that for kind of it's. The all-in-one is helpful. I don't know how much remote control we have or control from the computer, but it's very close to the very missed. There's the micro cinema or the micro studio, which BlackMagic released maybe 10 years ago. It's just a great camera. It's just not updated, and hopefully BlackMagic will get around to it because this little very small form factor is really valuable. And this one could be interesting. It's again, it's hard to tell from what they have here whether it would do all the things that we'd want it to do, but it has a lot of little features packed into it. And the only thing I'd wonder about is what is it does RTMP or UVC? I just don't know what the chip size is, so it's very hard to know what kind of quality we would get out the other end. If it's a 1/3 inch chip, it's not interesting. If it's a 1/2 inch chip, maybe. 1 inch or micro 4/3, and it gets real interesting real quick. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, one interesting thing is it takes the NPF batteries, so you can use your Sony type batteries on the back of it as well to power it, which is not something you see in a lot of webcams, but this is really designed to be used as more than a webcam, as a still camera and or a video camera. So
yeah, but
we still don't know the specs.
Yeah, they and usually I have to admit that when people don't show specs, I just assume that they're bad. So like if that's the problem. If you don't show the specs, especially when you release a product, I just assume the specs are bad, and so I think that's the hard part for them. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. How would you compare the Loupedeck to the Stream Deck?
The Loupedeck is. I don't know if I have one within root. It doesn't have any lit buttons. It's got lots of little buttons, so they're not organized like little rows, and it's not as much. There's not as much programmatic changes. It's not designed to tie into as many things, but they have a lot of different ones, and they're designed to kind of they have rollers and you have a lot of other more controls. Let me see if I can find it real quickly here. I had one just. Here's a this is I think the tour box from Loupedeck, and so this is you can see that it's got a lot of other controls, more like this is a roller. This is not a joystick in the center here, but then I have this is kind of you can kind of move this one, or you can spin this one around and push an indent on it, and these have so there's a lot of different types of controls, so it's a little more organic if you're trying to. I've been playing with it. Trying to edit with it and trying to play with it in Logic, and with limited success. So, but I've been but that's been sitting around for a while. But it's a more organic controller than the Stream Deck. I haven't found it to be more useful yet, but I still have faith. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, it's just weird. I looked that up because I wanted to see if it was anything I was interested in or knew about. And under that spelling, it brought up a controller for Adobe Lightroom specifically on an Indiegogo thing. And it just caused me thinking, are we getting into trouble with, the same spelling, the same terms for different things in closely allied industries?
Well, I think it works with Lightroom. So it's, so Loupedeck will work with, there's lots of Loupedecks. There are ones with buttons that I was talking about, but they also have the big thing is Loupedeck has some with buttons and some controllers. I have the smallest one, the little one that I have, but there are many of them, and some of them do have the buttons that are closer to the Stream Deck, and but a lot of them have rollers and all kinds of other things. But there is one, they do have a build of Loupedeck that works with Lightroom and Photoshop and other things where, you can map your settings of what you're doing so that if you're trying to control things really quickly, the big thing is that the Loupedeck is kind of like a more advanced version of the Stream Deck Plus. So the Stream Deck Plus has these buttons, but it also has, you have these little encoders here that I can turn. Imagine a whole bunch of them in different shapes and different forms, and you can figure out what you want to use. The smallest one being, again, what I have, which is the Tour Box, but they have, larger ones that are, much more robust. So let me see if I can grab this one here. You can see it. So if you look at this is a larger Loupedeck. And so you have, a lot of more specialized controls down here. You have encoders on either side. You still have the buttons. You don't have as much industry support for it, but it's there. But that's another. So these are basically building more specialized interface tools for your work. So you're not just stuck with a keyboard. And Stream Deck is a little bit more structured, but it's also, I think, much more supported. I think Loupedeck was bought by Logitech. Is that right? They just got bought by Logitech, I believe. So they're so we'll probably see a lot more of them. Next question.
Let's see. Graham Cardwell in Belfast, Northern Ireland. I've moved to a new desk which faces into a corner with severely limited space. How best can you light yourself softly without soft boxes? And he asks it as a question.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
There's a lot of options you have, especially if you go to flat panel displays like the IntelliTech. It's just a pad with LEDs sewn into it, and you can squeeze it. And the best part is it's only about yay thick. So that would be one option, depending on how much depth you have behind that desk. The other thing, if you're looking for something soft and reasonably priced, Nanlite makes a number of different panels that have edge lighting in them. And what that means is the LEDs are angled onto the edges so that it diffuses the light before it comes in and then bounces back out at you. And that way you don't have to pop a big shimmer on there or something else that's going to take up a lot of space.
Go ahead, Courtney. Can't hear you, Courtney. This is why we use hardware mute. Because if it was just talking about it, I just want to outline why does Alex is so obsessed about hardware
exactly
mute?
the same problem if we'd had a hardware mute because it was unmuted and then I clicked the button and it muted. So
it's a moot point.
It can still be the opposite. All right. Anyway, I use the Newar flat panel lights. They're pretty cheap. They're bicolor. They have the new ones have a built-in battery built into that'll run it for quite some time, 8,000 milliamp hour battery. It's adjustable in color, temperature, and brightness. Gives you they're very thin. They're edge lit panels like the stuff that Mitch was talking about. And they're reasonably priced. You get a pair of them for $169 with a carrying case so that with the built-in battery, you don't have to worry about those pesky power outages we were talking about earlier.
You got Bill.
Don't necessarily be afraid of a softbox. Right now I'm sitting in my key light, which I'm giving you a bad phone shot of, is above my main big monitor, and it's got a fabric grid on it. And because you're in a corner, you do have some space typically behind you, behind the light. So most photo softboxes aren't necessarily as deep as some of the old video ones. So you might be able to put a softbox up. That's just convenient for me as my main key light. I use two small panels for eye and face lighting, but that kind of gives the overall, brings up my whole body and anything around me to a level where I can get a decent exposure out of it. So it's just, horses for courses. There's ways to mount and light anything, and softboxes are a good tool.
Yeah, you can kind of build you can kind of build a rig. Definitely be interested in a photograph. So if you post a link to a photograph of the thing, we can probably think about how to build that in, because I think that you usually what I did is what I have in front of me here is now mine's a little bit bigger, but I didn't get a big light. I have a couple lights, and then I have I used the maker pipe. So maker pipe basically are they're little pieces that will fit onto EMT piping. And so I have the maker pipe, and I built basically a frame that's 5 feet wide and 3 feet deep. But you could build that frame into your corner. So you could build a big frame with maker pipe that would just fit right into that corner. And then you drop some lights behind it. And now you're going to build up this big, all I did is hang diffuse material that I bought for $15 and cut it up from Amazon. So it wasn't something that was particularly high quality or expensive to put in there. and then I just flushed it with a bunch of light and some lights behind it, and you end up with a big softbox. So that's something that you can do. That I think the frame cost me maybe a total of all materials, maybe $20, $30, maybe with the mat, maybe $50. And then the lights behind them are a little bit more expensive just because I had them laying around. I'm using some Nanlite 100s, but I just mounted them back there. But there's a lot of things you could put back there, like the Newers or other things like that would be less expensive. You can also put little point lights back there because you're just pointing them at the diffuser. So you can. There's a lot of ways that you can light that up. Quick reminder that, of course, you can ask questions all the way through the show. So for the first hour, go ahead and tag those. And you can tag them for the second hour. If you've got comments, questions, concerns about SIGGRAPH, you can go ahead and throw those in and tag them for the second hour. But go ahead and throw those questions in for the first hour and make sure to vote on them so we know which order you'd like us to answer them. Next question.
Alton Christensen in New York City says Descript is apparently making some huge announcements today, and he's got a link to it. Thoughts?
I don't have a lot of comments yet, but if you ask tomorrow, we'll probably have more comments because we'll see what they released. So go ahead and ask this again tomorrow, and we'll have opinions because it looks like it's happening at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and so that's right at the same time I'll be on Mac break. So I'll have to find out afterwards what it actually looked like. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. How do you use AI in your everyday workflow?
Go, John.
Well, you have to come over to my house because I use AI all day long. I'm using a combination now of ChatGPT 4 and Bard and Claude. I'm getting better results out of Claude and Bard lately.
What is Claude?
Claude is Anthropic's LLM, which is guys that used to work at OpenAI left and started Claude. They raised $500 million on a $5 billion valuation. And Claude's really interesting.
Is it Claude like Claude like a name, or is it like Claude like a when you said Claude the first time I was like, why would they name it after a clump of dirt? So but it's Claude like a
CLAUDE Claude.
Okay. Yeah. So make sure we had that correct.
So you take all three and then you average them all together and you end up with really good written text.
What makes Claude different?
Claude allows you to input way more than any of the other large language models. It's like 100,000 tokens you can input into the model, which is way more than anybody else. That's the differentiation. And then, of course, we use Midjourney, just like I'm sure Alex says, to create the artwork in Midjourney, and then I do compositing or editing in Photoshop. Generative AI in Photoshop is absolutely amazing. And then I'm using DID to create talking avatars. We did one for office hours. Courtney, I was working with Courtney on that. And then using 11 Labs for audio, for speech, which is really, really, really good. So
and you can just, with 11 Labs, you can just take someone's voice. You just take if they're doing a podcast, you just take the podcast and just train it on them, right?
We did Courtney's voice. I took one of his videos off of his YouTube, and it came out pretty darn good.
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly, and I think that people keep on worrying about. I mean, everybody talks about like, why should I be doing this anymore? When they see at the NVIDIA a friend of mine, Fred, was at the NVIDIA keynote last week, and they were showing all the things you could do where you just call things out and things appear and everything just gets built. And the artist next to him just said, well, I don't even know why I'm even doing this anymore. And the problem is that the explicit control that we still need at some point, it still needs to be a person. It's not so far. I mean, we'll be able to get better at that. But I think that I still think we're going to unleash just so much creativity. There's so many ideas that are in people's head that just simply can't express themselves because they can't draw. Like, they can't make that image. They can't make those things. And I think that the ability to do that will really change things in the same way that, again, when we look at rap in the 80s, there were people who had incredible stories to tell and music to make, and they didn't have traditional education in the instruments that were necessary. And so being able to put things on top of that was really, really important. And it created a whole new industry out of it. Go ahead, Bill.
It's an interesting little anecdote. Some months ago, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, my wife was doing something and I was in here and I was looking at some videos from the battlefront in Ukraine. And the person who was narrating it is native from Ukraine. And so he's saying all the names right, but he has a very lilting speech pattern. And my wife walked by and she said, "Why are you listening to so much AI generated voiceover?" I went, what? And she was hearing the non-native English speaker speaking, getting certain things right, but having struggles with the other. And she immediately said, "That's an AI voice." And I said, "No, actually, there's the guy. He's speaking. It's not." But there's just so much confusion about what's what out there. I found that interesting.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, Japanese prefectures have stopped posting disaster information on X because of the new per-day tweet limits. Could you see threads becoming as useful for disaster response and notification as Twitter pre-Musk was?
I think currently posting the threads is more like if you posted into a forest and no one heard it, would it still be a post? So I think that there's almost no action in threads right now. So it's down, I think, 80% of the usage. And I don't know who's running into limits. People talk about running into limits. I don't know how many disaster posts the Japanese prefectures were posting. I have never seen this so-called limit to my tweets. Maybe I don't tweet enough or something, but and I don't, I tweet probably not that many times. I mean, I tweet maybe 5 or 6 times a day. If I, at a really heavy day, will be 5 or 6 times, and usually 2 or 3 times a day. So maybe I'm just a very low volume tweeter, but I feel like, wow, if everyone's tweeting that much, I'm not necessarily against the limits, if they were actually making that many tweets, but I don't know what the limit is. Next question.
Paul Wallace is next from Austin, Texas. Discuss 3D MD, dynamic 4D, 3D MD capture systems powered by 3D MD software. They're enabling computer vision, artificial intelligence, machine learning, XR, VR, AR, and he's got a link there.
Yeah. So what they're doing is what, there's been a lot of, sorry. That was my speaker is routed out. so that's what you heard there. I usually have it routed to my ears. So usually if I accidentally plug something in, it goes into my ears and I hear it, but not now. That's what it sounds like when the whole thing turns on. Anyway, so I was looking at the video that was being referred to here. And I guess what I would say is that what they're doing is capturing geometry as video. So basically, if you're moving, it can capture a moving hand, and then now you can look at it from a lot of different directions. And Microsoft has its own R&D. It's got a lot of other things that it's working on there. And so there's a lot of people thinking about this. And it started when people started using Kinect. The Kinect that came with the Xbox a long time ago wasn't very successful on its own, but people started playing with that idea of having being able to gather that data and then be able to turn it into geometry. Generally, the problem right now is that the geometry is not very clean. So it's got occlusions become a hard. If you put your hand in front of the camera, then you can't see what's behind it. Now they'll use multiple cameras to try to get rid of that occlusion, but occlusion still becomes an issue. Detail around the edges becomes an issue. So there's still a lot of stuff. I mean, it's early days. I'm not, and I think that it will get better. I actually think that what's going to be more interesting is how this technology, let's see if I say this correctly, morphs into nerfs. So as we start to see this technology grab the data, that video data, and reproduce it as nerfs. So these are neural radiance fields. The advantage of nerfs is that it takes a lot more, there's a lot more geometry that can be grabbed onto. And the problem with nerfs is that we can't really manipulate them at all. So we can't retexture them, can't do a lot of those things. But being able to grab that data at high velocity and convert it to something that you can move around is an interesting potential. Next question.
Eric Hurst in Hartford, Connecticut. While there are hundreds of thousands of BlackMagic ATEMs sold, how often are these used to produce quarterly CEO town hall events? Perhaps these larger events are mostly produced with vMix, OBS, WireCast, or AWS Link hardware?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I don't really have finite information other than the fact that during the pandemic, we still went out and I worked as a teleprompter, providing teleprompting services for a number of these live stream charitable events. And almost all of them that were live streaming were using ATEM Minis or ATEM Extremes, because that was new. So in my experience in the field, I'm seeing a whole lot of ATEMs out there being used on pretty high profile, not super high profile, but pretty high profile charitable events, CEO live streams, corporate meetings, things like that, Zoom meetings, things.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
My answer would be occasionally, depending on of access to and availability of tech people in the corporation. And I say that because I used to run into this a lot. I used to do mostly corporate video, and I learned to never underestimate the lack of technical chops of the line workers. And this is not a slam at anybody. The kind of stuff that we do and we take for granted, operating switchers and things like that, for most people, that is a black art, and they just don't understand how it works. So it would often be the case that unless a professional was coming in to do a switched show for someone, occasionally companies would have some young person, generally in the lower ranks, who was technically interested and learned to do the switch for a CEO kind of broadcast, and they would kind of toss that to that young man or woman in addition to their regular duties. And in almost all cases, I remember I talked to many of them through the course of my corporate career, and they would get, they're asking me to do this, and I'm learning it, and I'm fascinated with it, but I'm not getting paid an extra penny to do it. So unfortunately, I think that's the typical thing. It's seldom that a company takes somebody out and gives them the right training to become a specialist in something like the video arts. And it's just the way things I used to go when I saw it.
For when you're talking, it depends on how big of a company you're talking about. So I will admit that most of my experiences, Fortune 50 and really Fortune 10. But for the stuff we're doing, these are for town halls. These are big fly kits or broadcast trucks. So these are not little. We're not using OBS or vMix or something like that. These are much more involved pieces of hardware, and think like either a broadcast truck or something in the similar. In fact, I'm trying to find you a photo here so I can kind of give you a sense of what these back ends look like. But it's not like we're not making decisions about like this is here, just to give you a sense of it. This was our back end, I don't know, many years ago. Well, let's see, this is 10 years ago. This is the back end for our section of Dreamforce, and we're just doing the stream. so we're just this is just doing the stream, but that's our section of Dreamforce 10 years ago. And there were 5 or 6 sections in this one hall to manage that video. And then there was, other halls. So these kinds of things are big hardware. There's hundreds of thousands of dollars of hardware. Usually it's rented. Usually it's an external team. Not always, but almost always. Cisco does their own stuff internally, but almost everybody else does it. They'll bring in like Google I/O is 2 or 3 full-on broadcast trucks that are going out on the outside, as are a lot of the other ones. And so these are not, but they're not. So we're not really talking in that case about these. The ATEMs are really powerful for these smaller. Like if we're doing a small meeting in a room, or a smaller company can put something together, or what I use it for. I think that the best use of these ATEM Minis is really as a desktop unit. They really sit on a desk and cut between things like what we're doing, what you're seeing me do here. They're very effective at that, but I wouldn't do major events with them. We do little events with them, but we don't do, a lot of major work with them. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. Gillette Stadium in Boston, Massachusetts recently installed a new 22,200 square foot curved LED video board. When producing content for a curved display, don't you have to map your content onto a curved shape?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, it depends, Douglas. If it's a projection, then you would definitely have to map it. If it's a direct view LED, there's a server that's driving those LEDs that can do a couple of things. One is it may pre-distort the image that's going in if it's a standard 4K or 8K image. But generally, when I've gotten things like this, I have some friends up at the Lincoln Financial Field up in Philadelphia, is I'll just sort of pre-design around it. I don't necessarily have like one distortion that does it, because as you know, if you're moving an image across a curved shape, it's going to get different sizes depending on where it is on that curve. So the answer is kind of yes most of the time if you're using LEDs. And if you're doing projection, you have to obviously pre-design the image to work with that object.
Next question.
Peter Buck in San Francisco comes in with Zoom walked back their AI data policy and will now seek consent before using their audio, video, or chat for AI training. Any recommendations or just a buy, dude?
Go ahead, John.
Just a buy, dude. This is a bit of a PR is that our word? Kerfuffle?
Yes, that's a word.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had to walk this back, but note that Google has been training their AIs on all your data for a long time. They're doing right now. They're currently doing YouTube, so all your videos that you do on YouTube, a little bit different for a paid service, and so that's the wall that they ran into. One close example would be GitHub. So Microsoft trained on all of the code on GitHub, and that caused a kerfuffle as well. In fact, I think that's still a legal battle that's going on right now. It's a challenge.
So my understanding, and if you look at the before and after very carefully, Zoom did not back off anything. They weren't doing it in the first place. Like all they had to do was clarify what they were saying. They were like, okay, so if you don't understand, this is what we're actually doing. And so they were not clear. All they did was clarify their document. They did not walk anything back because they weren't doing what people were claiming in the first place. This article that started this whole mess was erroneous. It was, and I'm being nice because it was just flat out wrong, written by someone who doesn't know what they're talking about. It started off as a Reddit post by some Yahoo that was picked up by someone looking for a clickbait and turned into a kerfuffle, and Zoom had to basically apologize for not being more clear and then back off, and then change this, but they didn't change anything. If you just look at the contract before and after, it's not making any fundamental change to what it's doing. They're just trying to make everyone stop talking about it. Next question.
Rion Smith in Trinidad, West Indies, looking for a cheap, in quotes, HDMI wireless transmitter receiver with the lowest latency to be used dually for cams or IMAG. Thoughts on this? And he's got a link there to a B&H Hollyland product. So thoughts on it?
The Hollyland's pretty good. There's a lot of delay in the Hollylands, so that's the big thing. Is the delay in their range tends to be a little bit truncated. So you'll see more breakup in a Hollyland, and again, what you'll also see is a much larger delay than Teradeks and other solutions. So that's the cost for pretty short throws over and for. That are cost effective. I think it works. Where you really will have trouble is where you mix and match a Hollyland with a wired connection. It's going to be more problematic, or if anything that has to go to an IMAG where you'd have to actually see it. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, you might look at the new DJI. They're not, of course, the most economical out there. They're, I think, a couple of grand for a transmit receiver pair. But they're very low latency because, DJI got into the wireless links that they use are in the standard 5 gigahertz and 2.4 gigahertz ranges, but they're super low latencies because they're for flying first-person video drones. So you can't have a lot of latency there, otherwise you run into a tree or a wall. So they have very low latency, and they just came out with this transmitter with multiple receivers that you could use in a situation where you're doing IMAG. Put a receiver behind your IMAG screens and one transmitter from your source that goes to them. Might work for you, but it is, like I say, a couple of grand, and the receivers are about $1,000 a piece, I think.
Next question.
Tommy Chance in St. Paul, Minnesota says, what Ethernet switches do you folks use in your setups, and what do you look for in specs for them?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I used a Netgear, and I know there'll be some groaning, but they're just readily available. They work great. In my particular case, I like the PoE version, where the PoE Plus, so I can power my Dante network, and I don't necessarily need switched Ethernet for that. So it's simple for a guy that doesn't know a lot about IT and IP. It works well, and I have had no problems with them. They work reliably well.
Yeah, I'm using this is the Netgear ProSafe Plus switch with PoE. So having PoE on most of them is important to me because I'm powering a bunch of things to them. So, and that's worked pretty well. My router is a Meraki. My switch is this little Netgear. This is my desktop switch. I mean, obviously we use other switches. We use Cisco switches at the office. So it just depends on how much you're putting into those things. But for my little desktop one, this is an 8-in or a very small, relatively inexpensive switch that seems to be working well on my desktop. Next question.
Paul Wallace, Austin, Texas. Worldwide market share of video conferencing. Zoom has 55%, Teams 21%, Goto 13%, Webex 9%, RingCentral 6%, Meet 5%, FaceTime 3%, Skype 3%, Messenger 0.82%, bluejeans 0.0. I think they're gone now. Any surprises on this list? And Paul notes he was shocked about how Messenger is so low.
Do people actually use Messenger for video? I guess they can. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, is he talking about Microsoft Messenger?
No, I think he's talking about there is a video feature in Facebook's
Messenger.
Well, it was down at 0.82%, so less than 1%, significantly. So there may be some holdover.
And I was surprised that Teams in the corporate environment, Teams is probably pretty high. Zoom has taken a lot of their business. It used to be Skype, and Skype's down to 3 because they pretty much Microsoft, which owns both Teams and Skype, decide to destroy it and sideline it and not really support it anymore in an effort to move everybody to Teams. So that doesn't surprise me very much that it's down to 3 now, but it does still work. It hasn't been completely eliminated yet. But like Alex says, yeah, they added stuff onto it that made it pretty difficult to use.
Yeah. I'm not surprised that Zoom has become kind of the thing that you just see the most often. Obviously, bluejeans was something that people were using for a little while, and now that's kind of dropped off.
Actually, there was a note they shut it down.
No, I know. I'm saying they killed it because it was dropping off. I mean, it was just falling like a rock. I'm a little surprised that Webex is lower than GoToMeeting, just because both of them are like I don't see them very often, either one very often. I haven't seen GoToMeeting in a couple of years. Webex I've seen maybe once in a long time. So
whoops! It looks like Alex is frozen. Is that am I confirmed there? Yeah, it looks like that. So unfortunately, let's see. Are there any more hands? Courtney, you had a comment on this.
I already did comment. Oh, Alex is back.
Alex is back. Alex, you froze there.
Am I back? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? So I was a little surprised that Webex was as low as it is. I mean, there's a couple companies that still use it because once it's installed and it's part of their security profile, it's hard to change. I do feel like Zoom would do better if they paid less attention to Teams and more attention to making just a better video product. I think that's the danger. Zoom is way ahead. Zoom won't stay ahead.
And we're back in. Yeah, Alex must be having connectivity problems. Let's see if we'll give him I'll tap dance for 10 seconds and see if
they're looking backwards at a company behind them.
Alex, you're very intermittent. I'm not sure if it's Wi-Fi or something going on, but you dropped out again for a significant period. Yeah, you're back.
Yeah, I'm not on Wi-Fi, so it's just whatever's going on in my network.
Something's going on.
All I was going to say is that I think that, and I don't know where I left off or where I fell off, but I think that Zoom's biggest danger is looking backwards at Teams. Teams is behind them, and I feel like they're trying to match features outside of video with Teams. This is a huge mistake. This is what Apple did in the 90s, and I think that Zoom has become distracted by Windows. And I think that there's a pretty big danger for Zoom that they're going to get themselves lost instead of, I think that's the biggest danger is they're going to get lost and not take advantage of the fact that they're just the best video platform and continue to make that better. So hopefully they'll be able to do both at the same time. Next question.
Alex Legnowitz of Toronto, Canada. What is the current suggestion for lower budget cameras such as the Brio 4K Insta 360 Link or Obsbot?
I would definitely pick the Insta360 or the Obsbot. I have both of them now. The Obsbot Tiny 2 is the one that I'm using, that I'm testing at the moment. I will say that I like the Obsbot camera itself. I think maybe even better than the Insta360. The software is not stable and not nearly as good as the Insta360. So the Obsbot is, their software development is there than the Insta360, but the camera itself is also, we think, controllable by OBS, but we haven't been able to get it to actually work yet. So it's between the Insta360. If I was going to pull something out of if I was going to say buy something right now, I'd probably still say the Insta360 Link, but we are testing the Obsbot Tiny 2, and the reason that we're looking at the Obsbot is because the Insta360 has not published an API. Next question.
Michael Vosbein in Woodstock, Georgia. Is there any such thing as a USB switcher? I have several USB cams that I use with Zoom and would like to select one camera or another without scrolling through them.
Well, I guess the question is that if you're trying to do it with a piece of hardware, then that'll be hard. You can use something like OBS, Memo Live, vMix. Lots of other things can be used at software that will then output a video that you can use, that you can set up as a virtual camera into it. So there's also Ecamm is another one that you can use for that. So these are all USB sources to your computer that then can be switched. So software switchers for that, you have to watch sync and lots of other things because they tend to get behind and they're not as stable as a piece of hardware. But I think that's as close as you're going to get. Next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Mackbook Pro M1 on Monterey has its settings for require password to wake computer unchecked, but it doesn't seem to care. I've toggled this setting on and off, and regardless, it asks for a password after every sleep. Reboot no longer solves this. Any suggestions?
It's so rare for me to not just type in my password. That a lot of us have it tied into our watch or our phone or other things like that. Like if my watch is near my computer, it just opens. But I'm just used to. In fact, I keep different passwords for all my computers. I just type it in as I go. The best way to handle this is to not have it go to sleep so fast, or put it to sleep manually if you really want to. But if you're having it close all the time, you'd have to type it in all the time. But I guess I don't. It may be that they're not getting enough feedback because people. Next question.
Next one comes from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. What's the perfect roll-around standing desk?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I don't know about roll-around standing desk. I was looking at these on Monoprice the other day, and I was surprised at how cheap these electric adjustable height desks are. So you can use them as standing desk, and you can buy just the hardware and put your own desktop on there. For about $100 from Monoprice, you can get an electrically adjustable height stand and just put some casters on the bottom of it, and there you go. You can use it as a sitting desk or a standing desk, and adjust the height as you go. So that looks like a good solution for $109.
Hey, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, for me, it depends on how much desk space you need. If you need a regular 60-inch wide desk, then those things are fabulous. I have found that for rolling rigs, and I learned this in my voiceover stuff, I built one that was narrower than that just to hold a computer and maybe a couple of little peripherals. And what I really discovered was the medical field has tons of that kind of really robust furniture because they have to roll test carts of things room to room. So they're really well built. They tend to be a bit expensive, but on the used market, they can be really inexpensive. And boy, they're stable, they're solid, they don't rattle around. So that's another possibility to look at if you need something smaller.
Just a quick reminder that tomorrow we're going to be talking about mixing maxims. This is the universal truths of preparing to mix any kind of live event for PA, recording, broadcasting, and streaming. So we're going to be talking about that tomorrow. Thursday, my brother's going to be talking about Steadicam. So my brother's going to be in here, and we're going to be talking about the Trinity rig and Steadicams and answering your questions about those. So that should be a lot of fun on Thursday. The Zoom team, Andy and Jonathan and Sam, will be here on Friday to answer your questions about a lot of the the new features that Zoom is coming out with. So stay tuned for that. Of course, we have general Q&A on Saturday, and then on Sunday, of course, is introspection. It's usually a good time to ask philosophical questions and office hours inside baseball questions. So stay tuned for all of those in the upcoming week. And now we're going to go ahead and jump into the second hour to discuss what we saw at SIGGRAPH. And now we're jumping into the second hour, and we're going to talk a little bit about SIGGRAPH. Some of us actually were there. We broadcasted from SIGGRAPH, and I think we had a pretty good time. I think that I would definitely go back and look at the coverage. I think we did a pretty. I think the coverage was pretty good. You got to see a lot of different things and a lot of things that we found interesting, and I think we had a pretty good interaction with everybody asking questions. The one thing I would recommend is when you see us doing those lives, is definitely jump onto those and ask the questions and really keep the conversation moving forward. We did have a lot of good interaction with everybody here, and when I did that announcement, I lost my panel. So just give me 1 second. I can't see anything. So there we go. All right. Anyway, so we're gonna we'll talk a little bit about it. I don't know if the other panelists had things that they saw that were particularly interesting. Alan, were you following SIGGRAPH much from your vantage point?
I was heads down and knee deep in production through the entire week, so I wasn't able to follow it too much. Sorry.
Yeah. It's all good. I mean, I think some of the trends that we saw. There was a production summit that happened the week before on Thursday and Friday, and then there was SIGGRAPH. And I think that the things that we saw a lot of movement on are nerfs. So we've been seeing nerfs building up over the last couple of years. These are the neural radiance fields. And the ability to use them and how people want to use them, they're not ready for production yet, but they are, but we see a lot of things that aren't ready for production for a little while, and then they slowly find their way into production as people figure out what to do with them. So we saw the, nerfs started to pick up speed in that process, and a lot of people are talking about them. Of course, there's more motion capture. Motion capture has gotten to be much less expensive than it used to be, along with a lot of pretty interesting tracking tools. We're going to bring some of these folks on for second hours for these Tuesdays, because a lot of the match moving stuff has gotten to be. I mean, when I started doing this, I know I'm always like, I can't believe we used to have to track that backwards in the snow, and it's a lot. It's gotten a lot easier, and there's some new tools out there. I think that we talked a little bit. Well, I think there's some questions about this, but there was some comments and questions about Feather. Feather is a free app, which I have downloaded now. I'm still learning how to use it, where you can sketch in 3D. So Feather is on the iPad. It's free, and and the demo was just unbelievable. Like being able to basically establish planes, organic planes, and then be able to sketch across those planes is a pretty amazing tool to look at. So I think it caught a lot of people and got them pretty interested in it. There's a couple new 3D apps that are coming out that we covered during the event, as well as seeing. I think the thing that was pretty impressive also for me was seeing the new USDZ imports into Resolve. So now you can bring in USDZ files into Fusion and be able to build composites and do all that stuff all within Resolve, which I thought was pretty interesting. Go ahead, Courtney.
Wacom hinted that they were going to show something new the second day, and we never found out what it was. Did you ever find out? Wacom. Yeah. Wacom.
We did learn the one thing that was very important is that we would like to spread the word. It's Wacom. It's Wacom. We asked someone at the company, how do you say this? Is it Wacom? It's Wacom. Wacom is the right way to say the word.
You wake them, you whack them, and then you walk them.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, yeah. So Wacom is the right way to do it. They did say they were going to do something new, but I don't. Did you see anything new on their site? We didn't. I think we just didn't come back.
When you right before you left, you said, "Are you announcing anything new?" And they said, "Come back tomorrow because we're going to announce something new." But you never went back to the next day.
We said, sure,
we'll be back. Yeah,
we'll be back tomorrow. I'm looking to see if there was an announcement there. Yeah, we had a good. What was really cool with the they had the history of them. Oh, this is the new. This was released 21 minutes ago. Oh, so it's just a new Wacom one. So this is I think that's what they were excited about, the Wacom one. I don't know what it's now.
Wacom one, Wacom.
The Wacom, sorry, Wacom. I'm gonna have to get used to it. So the Wacom one is this is what I'm using. So the Wacom is what I use here to draw. So when you see this, happening on my screen, that's using a Wacom one. So this is a new version of it. It looks very similar to the old version of it. I'm not sure what is new and different. It looks like they have one that's a little bit smaller and one that's a little larger. I have to admit that I am somewhat interested in a smaller version of this. You think that you want a larger version. You want a larger version. The first time we built this drawing app the first version of this drawing app was used on a 21-inch. It's this giant piece there, and it's just too hard. It was actually too much movement. Your arm got tired if you were doing a lot of markup, and it just didn't matter. Like the resolution didn't matter at that point. So we really have gone to smaller ones with screens, and we tried there's some knockoffs from the Wacom that we've tried, and we haven't been that impressed with them. So we kind of backed off from that. The cool thing about the Wacom booth was they had the very early versions as well as all the way up. So you got to see what it looked like in, I think, 1984, which is when the first one came out. So it's an interesting thing to see the iteration. So yeah, it was good.
You could tell from the size of the bezel how old they were.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's some point where we're going to get to a bezel-less, Wacom. So it'll be interesting. Just a piece of glass that you just tighten. Maybe you might use transparent. I don't know, transparent circuitry somehow. I don't know. We'll see. So anyway, yeah, that was cool. Obviously NVIDIA and AMD had a lot of there. Another thing that I thought was really interesting was the clothing. So a lot of the, digital clothing was really interesting that they have. You can run run a character into a clothing simulator. A clothing designer can design it the way they normally would with all the stitches and everything else. And then the simulator will wrap it onto the body and then simulate all the motion and then be able to export that back out to the 3D application, which I thought was pretty interesting. We showed some of that on the live stream as well. So, but I think that as far as trends go, I think capturing people's movement and moving them in, being able to, the simulation and nerfs are, I think, some of the big things that we saw a lot of. And of course, AI was everywhere. Like people talking about the impact of AI, being able to open up a 3D application and just say, I want 300 spheres, that are spread out evenly, and boom, now spread them out randomly, boom, now do, and Alan and I can attest to the amount of time it takes to do that. Normally, like you can build a replicator or you can build something else, but being able to just say what you want and talk about it. And I think that we're going to see I think we're going to end up seeing a lot of 3D apps taking on all kinds of AI tools where a lot of your generation, I think that you may still break down and do a lot of the stuff manually, but a lot of the general generation of stuff that we tried to do before is going to be stuff that we're just talking to the 3D app. Give me a mountain, give me this, push this down, move this around. And I think that we've all dreamt of a day when that would happen. But we're getting pretty close. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, going back a moment to you mentioning the costume design kind of thing, that was a wow moment for me, because I thought about the fact, like my Comic-Con folks that I love who spend all their time designing characters and things like that, to be able to work virtually out of, wherever you are and build your brand and your skill set as a costume designer for the virtual world, you can just see that clearly through line as something that young people will be interested in doing. And, wherever you are in the world, you now have access to being able to apply those skills that you used to need a brick and mortar plant and scissors and fabric and things like that. And you can now do that 100% virtually. And it's the bare bones beginning of that whole industry. I just found that fascinating. And it's clearly something with all the character animation, with all the gaming, that's clearly going to be an explosively growing area. A virtual digital designer for character apparel, weapons, who knows, whatever the game needs is going to be a diffuse and gigantic industry.
you can see a lot of people focused on how do you build assets for people. Like, so there's Global Objects was one of the companies that managed that helped push forward the production summit the week before. And of course, that's what a lot of what they're looking at is how do you capture a lot of things that people want to use. This is also why the original Epic suit happened with Apple, was basically Epic's trying to open this up so that they're not, that if you're buying and selling digital goods like swords or houses or chairs or other things to build your virtual experience, that you're not paying Apple 30% for every transaction. That's what Epic's trying to carve out, is that because they see a huge opportunity for people to be buying and selling virtual goods, but it won't work if they lose 30% every time they make a transaction. So that's that's why you're seeing that battle, and you can see us getting closer to that surface right now. Next question.
Joe Kidd in the Bay Area in California says, during live coverage, was Alex using a watch app? How was the app persistence managed? Thanks.
I was not using a watch app. I had a watch. I do have the watch there. I think if you saw me looking down, I was reading from my phone. So there is a different view of Makana that allows you to look at that shows up on a phone. So when I was looking down at something, most likely I was what you saw me there. It might have looked like I was looking at a watch, but I was actually looking at my phone, and I was seeing all the questions being sent in. So if they were sent to the host, I was able to see them on my phone, and that's what I was reading. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, persistence isn't that big a problem. And I say that because during my Comic-Con stint this year, I had my phone on the end of a monopod, and I would often look for overhead angles and things like that. And whenever I did that, I used my watch as a remote viewfinder for it. And I found that the persistence was decent. I mean, it would go dark, but I could just tap it quickly and it would immediately connect to the camera up there via Bluetooth, and I could frame shots based on my watch. So I am using my watch more and more in shooting as an adjacent either viewfinder or control for something. And in that case, you can not only see the shot, but you can tap the take a picture button there or go into record mode. So I'm just seeing more and more of that stuff. And I use it every day on my walks for tracking and letting me know where I am in my route and things like that. And so I'm just seeing more and more fast-moving watch to phone or watch without phone if you have a cellular watch. I just think it's a coming thing. It's becoming more and more integrated in my life, and it's really being useful. And I think that's going to continue in the production space as well.
Yeah, no, I think that the main reason I don't use my watch for anything in production is that persistence problem, which is I think Apple needs to give you a warning and then just keep it up. Like if I want an app up, I should have the ability to do that. So yeah, so that's why I don't use it for that. Next question.
Raj Shandil. Pixar's OpenUSD was being discussed a lot at SIGGRAPH. Why is it so important?
So one of the big problems that you have is getting data between different applications. So this may be web data. This could be Unreal. This could be Unity, Cinema 4D, Maya, Autodesk, a variety of Autodesk tools, all of these things. And the issue that we get ourselves into is how do we get all the data? When I say the data, the geometry, the textures, the lighting, the animation, a lot of all those features, how do we get all of that from one place to another? And right now, it's been ugly. It's been, we're using FBX, OBJs, a variety of other file formats. And there's always been this talk of let's get everything into one place, and so we can just safely move all this data from one place to another. Because a lot of times the data is the same, it's just in a different format. What's happened now with Pixar had this problem because they're moving things a lot between a lot of different applications. And so they built this universal scene description. So this is called USD. And Pixar used it internally. Apple saw what Pixar was doing and said, why don't we zip this? So it's all a continuous file. It's not considered like a package. And we'll make it its own file so that you can move it around. And so that became USDZ. But a lot of the industry is not necessarily interested in zipping it up because it slows things down a little bit on the packaging. So they really wanted USD. So everyone got together and let's stop trying to figure this out individually. Let's all work together. So Apple, NVIDIA, all the big players have now gone into OpenUSD. By saying it's OpenUSD, it means that it's not going to be licensed. at some point in the future, like MPEG does. It's going to be something that we can all use. And it's going to allow everyone to find a way to move all that data. Probably the closest thing to this was probably FBX or emblemic. I don't have to say that word very often, but those are probably the ones that were the closest to what we're talking about here. But USDZ is by far the best, in my opinion. And so I think that we're going to. It's going to make a lot easier for us to create, quote unquote, an omniverse that NVIDIA talks about, which is that we can move all of our objects back and forth between lots and lots of different pieces of software. Still have it. I'm sure it'll still have its sharp edges, but it's a pretty exciting, because once all those big players say this is what we're going to use, it becomes very hard for anyone else to peel out from there, because now all the big players. It's like AV1. Once everybody got into AV1, we all knew it was the future of what we're doing with video, even if we're not there yet. Next question.
Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada. What is the file output from Feather? Will it be compatible or transferable to other modeling tools?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, it does say you can export the files to OBJ files or GLTF files as well. Those two file formats it will export to. So OBJ, of course, is a very common file format. You can load those into any 3D modeling software that's used for 3D printing. So it will become handy for that. The Feather software only works on a tablet, and it has to be with touch tablet or something that has touch interface or a pin interface for it, because that's how it's designed to work. It looked very cool. The question is how well the snap works. When you're trying to spin something around and then draw a line between this point and some point in 3D space, where it snaps to on those endpoints is important, and that remains to be seen how easy that is to use. The demonstrations, they were very skilled in demonstrating it. I don't know if it's as easy to use as the skilled demonstrators were indicating.
It definitely takes practice. So I downloaded it and I was like, "Oh, this is heavy," But basically, the first stroke that you make will define the surface that you're drawing on. So you can look at it from any angle. You can look at it and just draw a squiggly line or a curve or whatever you want. And then when you turn it, you're ray tracing from your 2D plane. So, if you have this kind of a surface that you've drawn, from whatever your viewer is, it's casting basically a ray to this. And so, and so it's just moving. So you're basically then drawing something on that surface, and it's just following that surface along as you go. I had a little bit of a discussion with the designer of it. We're going to bring them on to talk about it, because it was definitely the showstopper there. I mean, I think everybody was trying to, and it was amazing. They came out of nowhere. No one had ever heard of them before, and suddenly they had like a 40 by 40 booth that was gorgeous. That was just mostly them showing how it worked, and it's just really impressive. They've had 4 or 5 years of development that they've been working on there, and it's I don't know what I would use it for, other than I think that I did send it to a couple of my friends that are designers that work in movies and that design stuff that I used to work with at Lucasfilm, and so we'll see. They haven't told me if they like it yet or not, but we'll get feedback from them and see if it lands. But it's pretty impressive, and I'm really curious about these little wireframes that you could build and theoretically send USDZ to other people so they could open them. Once I figure out how to use it, I could theoretically draw something, send it out as these other file form OBJ or whatever, run it through Reality Converter into a USDZ file, and then send it to somebody. You just text them the file, and they have this weird little wireframe that they could look at, which I think would be kind of fun. So we'll see. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. What screen resolution were most of the demo artist workstations? Was there any new display technology being demoed?
I didn't see a lot of, I didn't notice any, but it might also be that I wasn't really paying attention to screen technology, but it all looked like they were all 4K monitors. I mean, most of the time when I saw most things, when I looked at it, I would have assumed that they would be 4K. So pretty high resolution. Most 3D artists work in a 4K, or they split screens like I do. So, but I think you're not splitting a lot of screens, and so typically they had a 4K monitor. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, what was the most compelling technology you've seen at SIGGRAPH?
I think that the Feather was a pretty interesting one. I don't know if it's the most groundbreaking technology that we saw there. Leah was also really impressive. So we will bring them on as well. I don't know how we're going to be able to represent what they do. So Leah is a tablet. It's about $1,000, and it tracks your eyes and then hands you a 3D image, and it's amazing. Like what happens is when you pick it up, it's 2D and then suddenly snaps to 3D, and it's. I mean, they had a sample of Avatar that just sticks right out. Now they have their own software that can convert that as well, but it was super impressive. Like I was very blown away by the look. I mean, it really felt real. It's not like the little screens that kind of are 3D. This was really a 3D image. It was amazing. Go ahead, Courtney.
Did you ever make it over to the experience hall to see what was in there? Because that's, I guess, where they would show new display technology or any kind of new viewing technology, 3D.
I will admit, we were looking at it through the lens of showing things rather than us wandering around. And it was open when we went over there, and it was so crowded and so chaotic that we just made the decision we can't film in here, and I didn't have time to do anything other than film. so we were either prepping for film or doing filming or getting ready for it or whatever. And so because we made the decision that it wasn't a shootable location, there was definitely a lot of people in there, but we kind of skipped over it just because it was not laid out very well. Like it used to be, that experience used to be, there used to be a lot of space between, as I remember it, it was a huge cavernous area, and there was tons of space between booths, and there was tons of room to kind of work in, and they had packed that thing in so tight that it was just like, it was, not a great experience in my opinion. I think that was I think one of the challenges that SIGGRAPH had in general was I think that parts of it condensing down kind of pulled everybody together. So there was some energy that was created by pulling people together. But the rooms generally, I think the session rooms where they were doing talks ended up being sold out all the time. Like lots of them were there were way more people than they had seats. And that, doing that over and over again makes it really hard for people to get people to pay for it later, the next time. And I know that I had a lot of friends. I'm on a list with a lot of people that were all at SIGGRAPH, and they were like, well, I'm now just looking at whether they're being recorded or not. And then I'm not going to the ones that are recorded because I don't want to try to get in. And then the people who are watching online, there were streams, but they didn't have a lot of bandwidth. People online were like, I can't ask questions, which we could have fixed for them. But anyway, but the, I think that there was there was some energy created. There was a fair bit of frustration that was created as well around some of the, compactness of it, because it made it harder. So it'll be interesting to see what they do next year. Next question.
Paul Wallace, Austin, Texas. What booths and or vendors do you wish you had covered but didn't have the time to get to them?
It would have been nice to jump into the Adobe booth and really talk to someone about Substance. Admittedly, Adobe was very popular there. Their generative AI, the tools that they were showing off there were very impressive. I think that Adobe is now just starting to go into the 3D asset world where you're generatively being able to add things and build them out. And so I think that there was but it was just hard to figure out exactly where to shoot that. There was one on GPU-powered text that we kept on talking about going to, and it wasn't that it was that busy, but that it was a single developer, and he was always talking to somebody. And so at some point we were like, well, we'll come back, and we never. Because I was trying to figure out like why is it GPU-powered text? And so I think I was just mostly curious about it. Next question.
Roscoe was back from Madison with, is a trade show still the best place to announce new technologies? What has been the biggest announcement you have seen recently at a trade show?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I think we've moved on from trade shows. I think the biggest audience now is through influencers, and a lot of the companies have realized that, and that's why all these influencers that have millions of followers on YouTube get all of the new products before they're released to the public or announced to the public, so that their followers can, follow along. If they just do a press release, who's going to find that press release? But if they send a new product out to 4 or 5 of the top influencers and they feature it on their shows, That's far better than doing any trade show and a heck of a lot cheaper. It just costs you the price of that product. Of course, they may give it a bad review, so you have to manage that problem. But I think you reach a much wider audience these days by just going through YouTube influencers.
Good, Bill.
Yeah, it's interesting. When the guy said, can you come back tomorrow? I have an announcement. I remember thinking, oh, that's odd. You've just missed an opportunity to reach hundreds of people, potentially thousands over the course of this year by not being there at the right time in the right place and pushing it off when we weren't able to get back to him. I do think that, NAB used to be that first day when BlackMagic eventually took over that kind of initial press conference before the show opened. That drove a lot of coverage because everybody was there, and that kind of became the traditional start of the product release things. We'd get products before that. People were thinking, I don't want to get lost in the mess of all the new products coming out. But people still haven't quite figured out how to take advantage of shows like ours. If someone's coming live and they have an established audience, not taking advantage of that seems kind of like malpractice to me in the PR firm.
I couldn't understand why you would do a press release or do any kind of product release on the second day of an expo.
Yeah.
It seems like it was a very odd thought process there for that. So I think they were probably trying to time something. I don't quite understand. Maybe it was. Again, sometimes this comes down to there are PR rooms where they work with the press, and they may have been trying to time that or get access to it or something. But I don't know if it was worth it in the same way that Courtney was talking about it. I think that there is a value to releasing a video that tells your story as a vendor about why you think something's important. But then I think you need to move to influencers and other things to do those things. And so, I think NVIDIA's presentation is up online. It still has all the issues that you have with live performance. I mean, one of the problems that, we're not really talking about graphics, but when we talk about conferences in general, is the live keynote is just really hard to watch, like at regular speed. Now that we're used to Apple's keynotes coming out and being edited much tighter than a human can do, being able to jump and move around and be a lot more interesting and get into it. I just don't see how it continues to make sense to do a live performance of those keynotes. I just don't know why you would do that anymore. I mean, so I think that's the, and I think that putting out your message is important, streaming it even so that people can ask questions in real time and you get everybody watching it. That's what Apple does. Apple has millions of people watching it all at the same time, and so I think that is, I think there's a power to having everybody have that as a unified experience. So I don't think that it's not a matter of streaming, but I just don't think putting people on stages and having them wander around. The hardest part is that, generally, as I said before, as I've said a couple times now, that watching executives present is kind of like watching a fourth grade piano recital. Like it's just, this isn't what they do. Like they're not good at it. And they think that they are, and they think that it's important, especially if English is their second language. I just wouldn't put them up in front of a lot of people live. Next question.
Next one comes from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. Did you ever find out what the new chip NVIDIA rolled out at SIGGRAPH? Was this the big news at the show, or was there more buzz about something else?
Definitely a lot of people talking about it. That was one of the big keynotes that did come out. We talked about this chip a little bit earlier. It's expensive, and specialized. It was very little talk about it. I mean, there were people who talked about it right after the conference, right after it, and everyone was like, okay, well, and there's a lot of excitement around AI and generative AI and so on and so forth that's there, but we didn't hear a lot of it. The thing that you heard the most about there probably was nerfs. It seemed like it became this thing that everyone was talking about because it's basically a lot of the power of 3D, but with 1/10 the work. So being able to grab a bunch of images and be able to turn them into something that you can manipulate. The problem is it's very limited in what the manipulation is. So I think that was the thing that we saw. But a lot of people were talking about nerfs there, and how to create them and where they were going. Next question.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago, Illinois. Nick mentioned that he was the most excited about USDZ. Was there a specific development around USDZ that we in office hours should be keeping an eye on?
I think just the open USD is the thing that we want to pay the most attention to, is the fact that now we can be pretty assured that this is going to be the standard of how things kind of move forward. And so I think that is going to be, I think we'll keep on looking at what those, what that looks like. Next question.
Paul Wallace, Austin, Texas. Mocap hands were something you covered. Thoughts on mocap hands?
There's a couple different companies, and I don't have them off the top of my head, that were basically, there's a bunch of different ways of managing how do you get fingers. Fingers turn out to be really hard. So when we do motion capture, basically a lot of it starts with the hips in a lot of ways. Someone's got an open typewriter. You start with the hips and you figure out where they are, and then you have essentially what we call rigid bodies. And so these rigid bodies are we decide that if if we put a couple points on my forearm, and they should stay in the relationship to each other. If the relationship of those points on my forearm change, it means my forearm is no longer in the structure that it should be in. So something bad happened. So the rigid bodies allow us to kind of define those things, and it allows us to correct for occlusions, but we can put anywhere from a handful of points to a lot of points onto someone's body. The hard part is that the resolution. You're trying to get big motions. You're trying to have 30 by 30 foot space, trying to get the little details that are in our fingers and the big motions from the body are really hard to do both at the same time. And the face is the same way. How do you get all that big area and then still capture the face? So we have individual facial capture that we put on, and these are head rigs usually that have a small camera that are grabbing onto that facial capture. And oftentimes you want to do that facial capture with the body, so the body and the face are working together as someone's emoting. But the other thing that we're showing is finger capture. Now, there's a couple different ways to do it. One way to do it is to really explicitly grab all of the movement of the fingers, which is what one of the companies did. Another company only tracks the ends of the fingers as they relate to the center of the hand. And the idea is that there's not, your fingers can only do a couple things. And so because they're just hinges, and so you can use inverse kinematics to basically, if I move this finger in and out, all I need is IK to be able to tell, inverse kinematics basically takes the end point and moves the joints to where they have to be there. And so, so that can be done, because the fingers are relatively simple. So there was a lot of it. It can be done in real time. The resolution or the fidelity is very high now. So it's a pretty interesting puzzle there. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
What I don't understand is, I guess this application for the mocap hands was for adding the detail of the fingers to full body mocap where people are moving around in 3D space. But I did some video stuff for Magic Leap 15 to 20 years ago, and they had a device, and I know because I set it up and used it, and we photographed it. It's about this size. It sat underneath the screen and looked at your hands. And you could put your hands up in front of your face, and on the screen you would see skeletal hands moving in perfect synchronization, every finger movement exactly the same, every position in 3D space exactly the same. And I don't know what happened to it. I guess they incorporated it into their AR stuff or their AR glasses for hand gesture capture. But it was so real and so immediate, low latency, that I wonder whatever happened to it. And that was 10 or 15 years ago. So they had the ability to do it back then. Why now is it so hard? I don't know.
Well, I mean, what's hard is doing it in a large volume. So it can do it right under your screen, but could it do it when you're walking around in a space?
And you're not moving around. That's why I say the gloves are for full body capture to add the detail of the hands.
Right.
Where you're moving around and you're not necessarily, because Magic Leap used two cameras in it and positioned itself, calculated itself based on the stereo image.
And the new Apple Vision will do that too. So it has very high details, and as will, I think, the new Oculus, Oculus tools. So those are there. We had 25 years ago, I think, I was at a facility in San Jose that you could just go, you put gloves on. So it wasn't just visual, but we put gloves on. We had this huge umbilical cord that came down from the ceiling and hooked into this almost a helmet that you put onto it, and you were in a 3D space, and you said, I want a sphere this big, and it just appeared between them. And the interesting about the gloves is when you grabbed onto it, you could feel it. It had this little thing that it was an electrical impulse, but it gave you the sensation that you're grabbing onto it. And then you'd be able to pull it like this and stretch it out, and you're grabbing onto the isoprams and just kind of pulling it open and moving it over. And I thought in 5 years we're all going to be modeling like that, and we're still waiting. so anyway, so it's some of this technology takes a little while to make it a product. Next question.
Gordon Lake in Los Angeles up next. Is there anything you'd recommend to companies to make their booths better?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Tchotchkes, always tchotchkes, and I'm interested in hearing what was given away that was really cool.
The worst part is that I go to so many of these conferences that I don't want any swag. Like I don't want any swag because I'm like, what am I gonna do with it? I have a whole thing full of shirts with different logos on them. I don't wear shirts with logos, except for my own. Like if I'm doing something, but I don't wear logo shirts, and so I have this thing like I don't know what to do with all of this stuff, and so I don't really look for that kind of thing. The thing that's most valuable to me at a conference is mints. So I'm always looking for mints. I always go to a booth that has mint, not candy, but like if you have lifesavers that are individually wrapped, or if you have, something that's individually wrapped that I can just go grab one. Because I'm always self-conscious because a lot of times you haven't eaten very much. And so you go into you start developing.
When did Altoids become the mint of choice for production people?
So when I was doing seminars, so this is physical seminars, not what we, not virtual seminars. You could only buy Altoids I remember when I was doing them. So I used to I was a, what they call a course supervisor and a production supervisor. And, I know that there was in Denver where we were doing these seminars, you could only buy Altoids at an English shop that was, kind of a little bit outside of town. So you always send someone over to get a box of Altoids. They haven't changed, and except they have all these. I still use the same ones, the exact same peppermint or whatever it is that is the ones I don't. I've tried the other ones; they're not very good. Anyway, but yeah, so it was Altoids and Ricolas you could only get at that store. And now they're everywhere, but it was a distribution change there. They're very effective. Like I will say that they are curiously strong mints, as they say on the tin. So I think that Altoids are, they're not overly sugary and they're not overly whatever, but they do you at least feel like your breath is a lot better. So anyway, so mints are really useful on those things. I think that the other thing is, you really want to figure out for booths how to manage flow. So, you see a lot of booths that, there's how are people going to come by and a lot of people see what you're doing at one time. And I think that sometimes is hard. A lot of people make the mistake of not having monitors up high enough or having them large enough so that people can see them from three. You have to think about how will people see what I'm doing 3 rows back? And if I'm doing something that's worthwhile, then that's so we want to figure out how do we do that. And so monitors oftentimes aren't high enough yet, or the displays aren't high enough to really see what's going on. So I think that anything that does a live demo, if you've got something that's interesting, you got to be able to demo it live. And so I think a lot of people that did well are people that we could see from a distance and we could see what they were doing. Like Feather was, I don't know. I should have taken more photos. I realized doing this, the next time we do this hopefully we'll get the IBC team to do this, but for NAB, one of the things I want to do is I want to take a lot more photos so that when we do this, we can break it down and show like a little photo gallery as we're talking, as opposed to us just talking about it. So, but I think that there's a lot. One of the things that really kills booths right now is the onerous internet costs. So the internet costs are just insane. I mean, they are in some stratospheric level that no booth can ever have any bandwidth. And so that really is damaging. I don't even know why. I think that there's a whole opportunity for venues to start making bandwidth a lot more cost effective, and it would really change how these events go. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I have a new proposal, and that is that we establish a new crew position that is called Swag Pirate. Their entire desire is to go around and find the best swag out of the entire show. And then somewhere in the last hour of the last day of the broadcast, we bring them on to explain and show us what was the best swag out of the show. I guarantee that will be the most watched hour of the entire coverage, especially if it's a 3-day conference and people can go get that swag for themselves. It'll be huge.
We'll have the swag. Yes.
The Swag Pirate. I'm telling you, it'll be huge.
Does that mean they just walk over to booths and go, "Arg"? And then
Or can I have one of those, please?
Exactly. Next question.
Next question comes from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. Any thoughts on Niriads, it looks like, GPUs combined with CPUs, data storage tech? And he's got a Niriad IO thing there. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I just briefly looked at it. It looks like it's just utilizing, these higher end GPUs with, 100 or 200 execution units built into them to process, file IO. So it's taking over your file IO bus and parceling out file transfer across multiple GPU cores to speed up the transfer rate. And they're saying something like 20 gigabytes per second with 95% sustained speed and 92% capacity efficiency, whatever that means. But those are the specs on it. So I guess it's a faster way of transferring files within your network or within your system using the power of a GPU to handle the bit blitting or the data movement and encryption or decryption.
Next question.
Paul Wallace, Austin, Texas, has one here. Zeiss rep Jeff Duley was great. What did you think of Zeiss products offerings?
It was good. This is a tracking system that Zeiss has built around it. So match moving and tying that back in real time. And I thought it was a great demo. We'd have to see it more in production to see how well it actually works. But it was really good. Zeiss does a lot. I think we think of them as a lens company, but they do an awful lot. They have an awful lot of different tools that they build in this kind of area. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I thought the fact that it was well demonstrated that the fact that it was an optical tracking system, but it needed a lot of information from the lenses. Well, Zeiss makes lenses, so they were a great combination.
There we go. So that was our little coverage, our breakdown of SIGGRAPH. I know SIGGRAPH, I think this is a new thing for most of our community. So I think that'll be something that we'll keep on covering. We'll keep on finding some of these outside of just the raw video that we've done in the past. Our next one is going to be IBC. The team is putting that together. That's only a couple weeks away. So stay tuned for that. I know that they're putting together a small team to make that actually happen. And then also New York will be in October. We do have a sign up. I think IBC is they have the team that they're going to use. I know that for New York, there's a sign up sheet. You would have seen it. I think it went out on the email, but if it didn't, if you go to Discord, you can see it. Go ahead and fill that out. We're going to close that off pretty far in advance. So I'm not sure exactly when. We're probably 6 to 8 weeks out. We're going to probably close it off and decide that's our team. So if you're interested in being in the NAB New York team, right now I expect to be there with everybody else. And so if you want to be part of that team, then go ahead and fill that out. But we're going to keep on figuring this out, keep on covering stuff and looking at what those things are and really trying to figure out a way that we can bring these conferences and make them more real for everyone. And I think that, our commitment to this coverage, both before, during, after, is really the idea that, there's a lot of people that can't go to these conferences. They can't get the visas. They can't get the money. They can't get the time. They can't get all of those other things. How do we make these available to them? How do we make them available to everyone and include them? So we're going to keep working on it, keep figuring it out. And I want to thank again the entire team that worked on this. There was 22 people that managed our coverage for SIGGRAPH. And so hopefully we'll have that or more for the next shows coming up. But about every 6 to 8 weeks, we're hoping to do some kind of coverage. So right now we have, of course, SIGGRAPH we just finished. We have IBC coming up. We have NAB, probably looking at going to CES. So I think there's some fun stuff at CES that we'll do. And then NAM. And by the way, when we go to NAB, it looks like AES is right after it. So we may go ahead and stay and cover AES depending on my schedule, but we'll find somebody else as well. So anyway, so there's a couple things that we're covering there. So those might be back to back, and then we'll have CES, then NAM, then right now we'd be back to NAB. And we just want to keep on. We're going to keep on working on getting better and better at it. Quick reminder that we have a show workshop at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that is 1900 Zulu. So you can figure out your own timing. It's just a great opportunity if you're thinking about, oh, I might want to try being a reader. I might want to try what does it feel like to be a host or a panelist. This is a great place for you to jump in and practice and figure out if that makes sense for you. We're always looking for new panelists. So if you're interested in being a panelist, go ahead and reach out to one of us and let us know. And I think that there's a place where you can sign up that goes out in the email. So sign up for that. And this is a good, safe place to start. Also, if you're interested in being a panelist, Sundays are usually the best. Saturdays and Sundays are a great day to just jump on where it's the water's moving a little slower, and it's a great place for you to jump on and see how your rig works. Thank you to the producers for all the great questions rolling through here. Thanks to the panelists. We can't do this without you. So it's always great to see everybody here. Alan is starting here. We didn't hear a lot from Alan today because the producers. I'm just letting you know that Alan is here and he knows so much about 3D. So when you see him here on the session, you want to know that this is a good day to ask about 3D questions. And so definitely Tuesdays we're really focused on graphics. And again, each one of these days, we had such a great show yesterday about project management. So we have business building up on Monday, and graphics we're slowly building up on Tuesdays. Wednesdays we've got audio, which has been one of our stronger days. Thursday, of course, is video. Bill runs that one, and then Fridays we have, of course, logistics and just kind of all the other things, everything from IT to gaffer's tape. so we have a lot of things there. Saturdays are going to be 2 hours of Q&A for a while, or up to 2 hours, depending on how many questions you ask. And of course, Sunday is introspection. Thank you to the incredible crew on the back end who makes this all possible. I mean, this is not a Zoom. We use Zoom as a video transport device, but what you're really seeing here is an incredible amount of software that's developed by a great team and a management of all, like figuring out what are we talk about on Tuesday and what are we going to talk about on Wednesday, and then finally a great team that's cutting the show and putting it together and managing the questions and doing all the other things all at the same time. So thank you to the incredible contribution that everyone makes. We traveled 59,000 miles today, 95,000 kilometers, and that is 468 million bananas for scale. This is actually the banana that we use. Anyway, it's not really a banana. No. All right, let's go to after hours.
Not really a forehead either.
It's a fake forehead in a bear.
Petrified banana.
Petrified banana. Oh, we found a banana from the Paleolithic period. It's still yellow somehow. I don't know how that happened.
Put that banana down. You don't know where it's been.
All right.
Nice show, guys. Take care.
Bye-bye. Mitch, I hope your sound field quiets down.
Oh, it will. Thank you, Bill, for covering the readership today.
No problem. No problem.